I stood at the back of the venue in my full dress blues, medals gleaming under the lights, every eye in the room turning to me as I marched down the aisle like I owned the place. This was it, the wedding day my sister Emily had been planning for years, the one where she specifically told me, "Don't you dare show up, you're not welcome here." My heart was pounding, my palms sweaty inside those crisp white gloves, but I didn't flinch. The audacity of it, crashing her wedding in my military uniform after she disinvited me because of some stupid family drama that she and her smug fiancé had blown way out of proportion. Was I wrong? The thought echoed in my head, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant swell of the processional music. It didn't matter. Fast forward to about 2 years ago. Emily meets Jake at some upscale bar downtown. He's this hotshot real estate guy, charming as hell with a flashy car and a penthouse condo that screams, "I've made it and you haven't." They hit it off instantly, and suddenly, my little sister is head over heels in a way I'd never seen. I was genuinely happy for her at first. Who wouldn't want their sibling to find real love? But then I started noticing the slow, insidious change. Jake was always whispering in her ear, pulling her away from family gatherings early with a proprietary hand on her back, making these snide, dismissive comments aimed right at me. "Military folks like you don't understand the real world, Alex," he'd say, laughing like it was a joke. I tried to brush it off, but it stung, hitting a nerve that years of combat stress had made sensitive. Emily started changing too. She was distant on calls, skipping our sacred weekly video chats because Jake planned a surprise getaway. She seemed smaller somehow, less like the girl who'd stand up to mom and dad. The next 6 months were a blur of deployment. When I finally came back on emergency leave because our grandma passed away, the heart of our family gone, the change in Emily was complete and shocking. At the funeral, the most painful day of my life, Emily barely acknowledged me. She was too busy posing for Instagram with Jake, looking radiant in black, announcing their engagement, right there in the cemetery parking lot. Can you believe the sheer audacity? Grandma's funeral turned into their impromptu engagement party photo shoot. It was grotesque. I pulled her aside, tears already blinding me from grief, and said, "Em, this isn't the time. Grandma just died. Show some respect." She rolled her eyes, that new cold look on her face, and said, "Lighten up, Alex. Life goes on." That was the moment I realized the cracks in our bond were not surface flaws. They were structural failures. From that day on, the relationship deteriorated rapidly. Planning the wedding became Emily's entire personality, her sole obsession. She wanted this over-the-top affair, a destination venue in the hills, a custom gown flown in from Paris, a guest list of 200 people she barely knew but who could boost her social media profile and Jake's professional network. Money was tight for our side of the family. Mom was scraping by on her nurse's salary, and I was sending home what I could from my paychecks, but even my military salary was a drop in Jake's millionaire bucket. I swallowed my pride and offered to help, even suggesting we tone down the extravagance so everyone could afford to come. But Jake simply laughed it off with a sickening smirk, saying, "We don't need charity from Soldier Girl. This is our day, not a military parade." The worst part? Emily didn't defend me. Instead, she started parroting his lines. "Alex, you're always so negative. Why can't you just be happy for me? You're finding fault in everything." The escalation reached a tipping point when I found out Jake was actively bad-mouthing me behind my back. A mutual friend, appalled by his cruelty, forwarded me text where he called me a jealous spinster in camouflage, and said I was holding Emily back from her potential. The blood rushed to my head. I called Emily, my voice shaking with a rage that was barely contained. "How can you let him talk about me like that? I'm your sister, I raised you." She sighed into the phone like I was the dramatic, tiresome one. "You're completely overreacting, Jake's just joking. And honestly, Alex, your job does scare people. All those stories about war zones, it's not exactly wedding vibe. We want a positive, joyous day." The idea that my service, my sacrifice, was not wedding vibe cut deeper than any enemy bullet ever could. The final, definitive blow came 3 months before the big day. I was deployed again, sitting in a dusty barracks halfway across the world, when I got the email, yes, a 4. Cold, impersonal email, from Emily. "Due to recent tensions and your inability to support our vision, you're no longer invited to the wedding. Please respect our boundaries." I stared at my phone in stunned disbelief, surrounded by my squad who could see the immediate devastation on my face. My battle buddy Sarah came over and hugged me, whispering, "That's bullshit, Sarge. Family doesn't do that." I called Mom, who was heartbroken but too scared of losing Emily completely to fight back. "Dad?" He sided with Jake because men stick together, or some pathetic justification. I felt utterly alone, betrayed, and heartbroken, questioning every single sacrifice I had made over the last 20 years for this ungrateful, cold stranger my sister had become. The days blurred into nights of patrols and training, but in the quiet dark of my bunk, I'd replay childhood memories. Building blanket forts in the backyard, promising each other we'd always be there, a pact sealed with scraped knees and shared secrets. How had it come to this? I decided I wouldn't go down without a fight. I wrote Emily a long, honest letter, pouring my heart out, the deployments I'd endured, the friends I'd lost, how proud I was of her despite all the ugliness. I mailed it with shaky hands. No response, radio silence, complete, absolute erasure. As the wedding date approached, I was stateside on leave, staring at that ridiculous disinvite email for the 100th time. Part of me wanted to let it go, to respect the boundaries and move on with my life, pretending I didn't care. But another part, the soldier in me, the one trained to never leave a man behind, the older sister who knew Emily was being manipulated, screamed that this wasn't right. Emily was my blood, and if I was going to show up, it wasn't going to be a quiet, apologetic appearance in civilian clothes. That wouldn't convey the weight of my presence. I polished my dress uniform, the one with the Bronze Star ribbon from that grueling firefight in Afghanistan, the ribbons earned through blood, sweat, and the loss of good men and women. My commanding officer gave me a knowing nod when I requested the extra time off. "Go settle your family affairs, Sergeant. Some fights you can't delegate." Flying home, my mind raced with every imaginable scenario. Would she scream? Would she melt? Would Jake call the police? I landed, rented a car, and drove straight to the venue, a sprawling, ridiculously expensive vineyard with fairy lights and floral arches that probably cost more than my annual salary. Guests were already milling about in suits and gowns, sipping champagne, looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. I parked well out of sight, adjusted my cover, the hat for you civilians, and took a deep, steadying breath. This wasn't about revenge, this was an operation. I was fighting for my sister. Walking up the manicured pathway, heads immediately turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that military? Who invited the soldier?" The reaction was exactly what I'd calculated. I spotted Mom first, her eyes widened, mouth agape in a mixture of fear and relief. She rushed over, her face pale. "Alex, what are you doing? Please, don't do this." I hugged her tight, a quick, firm embrace. "I'm here for my sister, Mom, whether she likes it or not." The ceremony was about to begin. Emily in the bridal suite, Jake at the altar looking utterly smug and self-satisfied. I slipped into the very back row, standing at parade rest, my immaculate uniform a jarring, powerful contrast to the soft pastels and silks surrounding me. The music swelled, the double doors opened, and there was Emily. Arm in arm with Dad, she glided down the aisle in a gown that sparkled like $100,000, a vision of the perfection Jake had bought for her. But as she passed the midpoint, her eyes locked on mine. The world seemed to stop. Time froze. Her face went through an entire spectrum of emotions in 3 seconds. Furs. Pale shock, then a furious, deepening red, and perhaps, just perhaps, a flicker of that old sisterly guilt. She stumbled slightly, Dad steadying her with a grip on her elbow. Jake, turning at the altar to watch his bride, saw me and his jaw dropped. "What the hell?" he hissed, loud enough for the first row to hear. The officiant paused, confused by the sudden, palpable tension in the room. Guests murmured louder, the elegant bubble of the wedding shattered by the intrusion of reality and combat steel. I didn't move at first, just held her gaze, my body rigid with purpose. Then, slowly, deliberately, I raised my right hand and executed a perfect, crisp, respectful salute. My medals clinked faintly as I brought my hand to my brow. "Permission to join the formation, sis?" I said, my voice cutting through the silence, loud enough for the front rows to hear. A bubble of inappropriate laughter escaped from some guests, quickly followed by gasps from others. Emily stopped dead in the aisle, her veil trembling. "Alex, get out! You're ruining everything!" she cried, tears instantly streaming down her face, mascara already starting to run. Jake stormed down from the altar, his face contorted in a mask of impotent fury, reaching out to grab my arm. "You weren't invited, freak. Leave now or I'll have you arrested." I met his gaze, and with a gentle, firm pressure, the result of years of disciplined hand-to-hand training, I removed his hand from my uniform, Touch me again, and we'll have a problem. This is between family, I stated, my tone even deadly serious. Mom was crying now, pleading with Emily to calm down. The officiant, bless his professionalism, tried to proceed, dearly beloved. But it was chaos, a social disaster of epic proportions. Bridesmaids whispered. The groomsmen sized me up, unsure of who to defend. One of Emily's friends, of course, was live-streaming the whole scene, the kind of viral moment you could never pay for. There I was, standing in my uniform, the sister who wasn't wanted, facing down a wedding I'd been erased from. I had to make a choice. Walk away and let her win, let Jake win, or stand my ground and force her to see me, the real me, not the caricature Jake painted for her. I had to remind her of who she was, and who we were. Before anyone could move, I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the knot of emotion in my throat. Emily, I didn't come here to ruin your day. I came because you're my little sister, and no argument, no fiancé, no fancy wedding changes that. I've fought in wars for strangers, the least I can do is fight for you, my own blood. The entire room fell silent, hanging on every word. Emily's lip quivered. Jake tried to interrupt with a sputtering, angry noise, but I cut him off, my gaze fixed on him for one searing moment before returning to Emily. And you, Jake, you've poisoned her against her own blood and tried to erase my place in her life, but today, she is seeing the truth. I reached into my tunic, pulled out the long letter I'd written, the one she ignored, and handed it to a horrified bridesmaid to pass forward. Read this later, Em, it's everything I never got to say. What happened next was pure, raw emotion. Emily snatched the letter from the bridesmaid's hand, scanned the first few lines through her tears, and then, she dropped her designer bouquet. It hit the marble floor with a soft thud. She ran, not back toward the exit, but straight toward me. She launched herself forward and hugged me so tight my metals dug into my chest. I'm sorry, Alex, I'm so sorry, she sobbed, burying her face in my shoulder. Jake was apoplectic, threatening to call off the entire wedding, yelling, "This is absolutely ridiculous." But the guests, seeing the genuine messy human emotion finally surface, began to boo him. Literally booed the groom. Mom joined the hug, then Dad, finally moving from his shame-induced paralysis. The officiant, realizing the ceremony had taken a dramatic unpull, and turn cleared his throat and asked, "Shall we proceed with the sister?" Laughter, the first genuine laughter of the day, erupted from the crowd. Emily wiped her eyes, smiling through the mascara streaks. "Yes," she whispered. "Alex, walk me the rest of the way?" I linked my arm with hers, and together the soldier and the bride we marched down that aisle like we were kids again, side by side. Jake sulked at the altar, a defeated statue of entitlement. When it came time for the vows, Emily added her own unscripted promise. "I promise to never let anyone come between us again." The crowd cheered. I stood as her unplanned maid of honor, uniform and all, while they exchanged rings. The reception was epic. Toasts turned into heartfelt stories of my deployments. Emily danced with me first, apologizing profusely for letting Jake manipulate her, for letting him convince her I was jealous or a threat. Turns out, he'd been controlling and isolating her from all her supportive friends, too. That night sparked the necessary unraveling. 2 weeks later, Emily called off the engagement. Jake's true colors fully emerged, cheating, financial lies, the whole narcissistic package. She moved back with Mom, started therapy, and we rebuilt our sisterhood, stronger than ever before. I deployed again, but this time with daily texts and care packages going both ways. She even visited base, proud as hell of her hero sister. Crashing that wedding in my uniform was the best decision I ever made. It was a reminder that blood doesn't quit, even when tested. The silence after the story broke was deafening, yet somehow more comforting than the years of passive-aggressive tension. That chaos at the altar was our own personal nuclear option. And when the smoke cleared, everything that was fake, Jake, the expensive facade, the polite lies, was gone, scattered by the truth of a uniform and a heartfelt letter. The immediate fallout was, as you can imagine, absolutely explosive. Jake, fueled by his bruised ego and the sudden public loss of his trophy fiancé, tried every trick in the book to control the narrative. He was furious that his perfect curated life had been shattered by me, the jealous spinster in camouflage. He immediately threatened lawsuits over the cancelled vendors, and even went so far as to try and spin the narrative on social media, claiming I was a crazed, unstable veteran who had physically assaulted him when I pushed his hand away. He thought he could use the stigma against military veterans to discredit me. This move, however, spectacularly backfired. one of the veteran attendees, an old Air Force colonel who had quietly watched the whole thing unfold, started sharing the full, unedited video footage from the ceremony where Jake clearly tried to physically intimidate me first. That viral clip, which started as a disaster, turned into our ultimate defense, showcasing his true colors for the world, and more importantly, for Emily to finally see. The comment sections across every platform were brutal. People recognized his type instantly, the wealthy, controlling bully whose mask slipped in a moment of crisis. He went from being a hotshot real estate guy to a community joke almost overnight and soon faded into the obscurity he so richly deserved, his social influence melting away faster than his promises. Emily's recovery wasn't instant magic, but it was honest, and it was hard-won. When she moved back to Mom's house, leaving behind the sterile, controlled environment of Jake's condo, it was like having my little sister back, only this time, she was raw, utterly heartbroken, and stripped bare of her golden child armor. The manipulation she'd endured was deep, insidious, and frighteningly thorough. She started to unpack everything in therapy, realizing that Jake hadn't just criticized me, he had systematically isolated her from every friend who challenged his behavior. She confessed that he often insisted on being on her weekly video calls with me, then later would pick apart everything I said, twisting my stories of deployment into evidence that I was a negative influence or too damaged to understand her real-world success. He had even controlled her finances under the guise of investing for their future, forcing her to quit a part-time job she loved because it didn't reflect well on his portfolio. The hardest, most painful part for her was realizing that the man she loved, the life she had bought into, was a calculated lie, and that I, the one she had deliberately shut out, was the only person who had risked everything to save her. She started therapy immediately, which was a huge, brave step. We began talking, really talking, every day, no filters, no secrets. We re-established our sacred weekly video calls, but instead of small talk and surface updates, we went deep into the messy truth. She'd apologize again and again for the things she said, for believing him, for sending that cold email, but I always stopped her. You don't need to apologize for being manipulated, Em. You only need to promise me you'll never let anyone dim your light again. He made you believe you had to shrink to fit his world, but you don't. You're a force, Emily. Slowly, painstakingly, the confident, creative Emily started emerging from the shadow of the Jake-approved fiancé. She went back to school part-time to formally study event planning, but this time with a profound focus on real human connection, community, and smaller, meaningful celebrations, not just the massive impersonal spectacle Jake had demanded. She started building something real, something solid. Reclaiming her own professional identity, the financial aspect was the final awkward hurdle. The wedding fund, which had been primarily Jake's money, was mostly lost to non-refundable destination venue deposits and custom orders, but the small portion Mom and I had contributed over the years, Emily insisted on using for a noble purpose. She used it to pay off Mom's outstanding hospital bills from a surgery she'd had the year before that had put a severe strain on her nurse's salary. It was a silent, powerful, and deeply moving gesture that told me more than any verbal apology ever could. She was stepping up, recognizing sacrifice, and prioritizing the family's well-being and security, just as I had done for her when we were kids. It was the full circle moment, the proof that the heart of my little sister was still pure, just temporarily lost. Even Dad came around, slowly, awkwardly, but truthfully. Seeing Jake try to trash me publicly, calling me names and insinuating mental illness after all I'd done for the country, and then watching Emily break down and finally stand up for herself, shifted something fundamental in him. He had always been the quiet, traditional type, prone to siding with the man, but even he couldn't deny the courage it took to stand in that uniform. He called me a few weeks after the engagement was officially called off, not with excuses about men sticking together, but with a simple, raw, and completely unexpected apology. I should have stood up for you, Alex, right from the start. You were right about him and I let you down. For a stoic father who rarely admitted fault and lived by his pride, that was a massive seismic step. Our family unit, though scarred and forever altered by the whole ordeal, began to function properly for the first time since the divorce, built not on avoidance and polite lies, but on brutal, messy honesty and unconditional acceptance. My next deployment came up a few months later, and this time, the separation was profoundly different. I was heading back into harm's way, but I was leaving behind a sister who was strong, whole, and utterly devoted to our bond. There was no more silence or anxiety. We had daily texts, short check-ins that meant everything. She sent me care packages that were not just generic snacks, but filled with handwritten letters detailing her schoolwork, hilarious gossip about mom's terrible dating attempts, and always, a reminder that she was waiting for me. I, in turn, sent her the tacky, meaningful souvenirs from the foreign places I passed through, knowing they'd go straight onto her redesigned home office desk. She became my rock, reminding me with every call what I was truly fighting for back home. When I came home on my first leave, she was the first person waiting at the airport, having driven 8 hours just to hug me. She wasn't carrying a small designer purse, she was wearing a custom-made t-shirt that read, "My sister is a real-life superhero." And she meant every word. The biggest, most poignant moment came about a year after the unwedding. Emily had planned a beautiful, intimate anniversary party for Mom and Dad, not a second wedding but a celebration of their shared history and lasting love, a milestone Jake could never understand. The whole family was there. Before the event, she approached me with a serious look and asked me to wear my uniform again. Not to make a scene this time, but as a sign of our unified, lasting strength. I declined politely, explaining that the uniform was for duty and solemn occasions, not social gatherings, but I gladly accepted the maid of honor role she offered me for the symbolic renewal ceremony she planned for our parents. She laughed, her old sweet genuine laugh, and said, "Fair enough, Sergeant, but wear the bronze star pin on your dress anyway. It's earned and it's why we're all here standing together." Looking back now, standing here, miles away from that chaotic vineyard, I know crashing that wedding in my dress blues was the best decision I ever made, one that fundamentally changed the course of 3 lives. It wasn't about revenge, it was about a desperate final attempt at a reminder of who we are, of the unbreakable meaning of family, and the heavy price of silence and complacency. The uniform wasn't just metal and fabric, it was a symbol of service, sacrifice, and the unwavering commitment to a cause. And my sister, my blood, was my cause. I forced the confrontation not to ruin her day, but to save her life and our shared history from a manipulator who sought to erase me and everything I stood for. That moment, standing at parade rest in the back of that lavish ceremony, was a declaration of war against the toxicity that had invaded our family. And it was a war I was determined to win. Blood truly doesn't quit, even when it's tested to the absolute limit. We fought, we lost, and we ultimately won our way back to each other, stronger and more appreciative of the ties that bind than ever before. If you're dealing with family drama, especially when manipulation and toxicity are involved, don't let go without a fight. You might just save them from themselves, just like I saved Emily. That's the full truth of my story. The band sister who uniformed up and turned a wedding upside down, ultimately putting her family back together piece by piece, metal by metal.